Welcome to the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast, the show dedicated to bring you the news from the oil patch deep in the heart of Texas, with your host, Ryan Ray and Josh Shelton.
And we're back with the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast. We appreciate you tuning in to today's episode. This is episode 228. 228. I'm your host, Josh Shelton, my friend and co-host, Ryan Ray. Ryan, we got some interesting news coming out today, man. Looking forward to jumping into it.
Yeah, a lot going on. A couple of housekeeping items. The podcast, we put it in a different spot now. So it's at the Five Wide Business Newsletter. So that way you can get emailed to you. So if you want that, just go to fivewide.biz, sign up there. And that being said, everything else should work normal. But if you could, for the next week or two, to share around the podcast link wherever you're at, so in case links get broken or whatnot, they can find the show. Josh, man, last week, did you work any? Because I didn't work a whole lot.
I did, yeah. I was really busy last week, actually. I think I got off Thursday for Thanksgiving, but other than that, I worked pretty much every day.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
Yeah. Well, it's not too bad though. I mean, it was nice. It wasn't like I was working long hours, kind of 4 or 5 hours a day.
Well, 4 or 5 hours is a long day for you, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. So
yeah.
But no, man, a lot to get into. We got David Blackman coming on here in just a little bit. Crude, WTI crude is trading at $70, $70.39 this morning. So yeah, well, I'm sure he's got some strong opinions about that. And then, hey, listen, high voltage property management. There you go. There's your little ad. If you're looking for property management for your residential, commercial, or storage units, contact one of us, Josh, at High Voltage Property Management. Be happy to take care of you there. Okay, where are we going, bud?
All right, so I know we got a guest coming on in a bit. I wanted to start with an article that came out about the Texas Railroad Commission. So there's some news came out that the Texas Railroad Commission has ties to oil and gas industry, and there's a report that came out that kind of details some of those ties.
Breaking news there. The has ties to the oil and gas industry. That's hard hitting Dallas morning news for you right there.
Good. So essentially, they're trying to go in and show how the oil and gas industry, I guess, because of their extensive ties to the Texas Railroad Commission, can possibly, I guess they're arguing that it kind of manipulate policy. I guess is the angle that they're trying to take.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see them doing this because the Texas Railroad Commission, in a lot of ways, is what regulates the oil and gas industry. So it's hard. It's hard for me to see what the purpose of this article really is, other than give me your take on it, Ryan.
Right. I mean, so you have incompetence in government, which is we'll talk about that in a second. But having ties to the industry, there's really two sides of this, right? Do you want someone to regulate an industry who has no experience with the industry, or not? Like that's just kind of the first, right? So, and I think we all would agree, generally speaking, it's probably better to have someone with some familiarity with the industry. Now, there could be something where it's like something that's not as technical. You could see some kind of where it doesn't really matter as much there. But with all the stuff that the Railroad Commission is in charge of, you want someone who has at least some experience with the oil and gas industry, I would think. So once you say that, then you guys say, well, how involved in the industry can they be? And so do they have to sell their assets and or put in a trust or some kind of weird thing? And to me, that seems a very fine line, right? So if you're saying that the person can't be involved with the industry while they're serving as a commissioner, just understand that there's going to be ramifications for that. And if you say they can be, then there's ramifications for that as well. So those are all, to your point, I think, which is what you're getting at, which is those are all insignificant things. They could impact how these people, the Railroad Commission is voting, is acting, is moving, whatever. But that's kind of normal, right? That's normal. We elect lawyers to Congress. Well, okay. Well, raise your hand if you think lawyers are just the most finest, best people in the world, right? So like, it's it's really weird how we when these issues blow up, how all of a sudden we try to focus on all these things. With that being said, if they lied or misled or didn't do their job and caused the free and were responsible for the power failure last year, well, that's a separate argument altogether. Like that's that's the case that has to be made, and that has nothing to do with whether you're so you could have no ties to the oil and gas industry, just be completely incompetent and lie and lead to the freeze last year, right? So so the ties can persuade you, the ties can push you. I'm not denying that. I'm saying the question really is: did they lie? Did they mislead? Did they influence decisions to be made that were not in the best interest of the public for personal gain? Okay, well, those are all fine questions to ask, and let's go from there and see what happens. If you're asking me, do they do it? Obviously, I have no idea. But like, should we be surprised this is the case? Well, no. Also, just real quick, for the Dallas Morning News, they have a line in here that I thought was quite interesting. It's called. This is quote from the article. Quote: "The oddly named Railroad Commission has little to do with trains and is the chief Texas regulator of the state's massive oil and gas industry." But yeah. I hope the Dallas Morning News realizes that we didn't like this is not something new.
yeah, this is not.
No, this is not new. It's not new. Like if you're going to speak on this, you should, you probably should talk like you know it, not like it's oddly named. And I get why they're probably writing that way, but it makes the author of the piece kind of look as if I don't know who it is.
So there's something there. So obviously what you're saying, Ryan, is that it's good to have people that know about oil and gas making calls on some of these decisions, because if you're completely ignorant, then you're not going to be able to make competent decisions. Now, the flip side of what I guess some other people would say is that it's not necessarily competence that they're worried about. It would be play into
integrity.
their integrity. So and that would be the risk. And I grant that. I mean that if you have the ability to pass a bill or a law or regulation that will make you an extra $100,000 this year, even though it's not the best regulation, you're going to have a lot of incentive to do it. So
this gets down to the thing that we talk about on the show so many times. The more power you give to an agency, this is the temptation that's going to be there, right? So if you have someone who has no idea, no ties to the industry, and you bring them in and put them in charge, you don't think people in the industry that want to influence them will try to influence them still? Like you think people are like, oh well, Bob knows nothing of oil and gas, therefore we won't try to sway him. No, right? They're going to hire Bob's wife, his cousin, his aunt, his uncle. They're going to donate to his campaign. It's good. It's going to happen. Maybe you have to have someone with integrity. That's the whole thing here. You have to have someone with integrity who wants to do the right thing.
Yeah.
What you're going to find is that's hard to find, especially when they get this kind of power. And so you have to vote them out and hold them accountable. And so with this issue particularly, of course they have ties to the oil and gas industry. That's no shock. And so we'll see how it pans out, and
there's a little thing in here where it talks about Commission Schiff estimated Christy Craddock had at least 1.5 million of stake in the oil and gas industry. And then it says here, Craddock's response: in accordance with the Texas Ethics Commission, my personal financial statements are fully disclosed as a letter of the law and publicly accessible. And that these laws ensure transparency of our public officials to maintain the public's trust in our ability to appropriately govern. And I take these laws seriously. So just looking at that, what they're doing is they're looking at people who could stand to gain significantly from passing different regulations.
Sure.
And they're looking at people that have all these investments. But again, So personally, I kind of like where they're coming from, in the sense if they want to go after every politician in the country that has any sort of opportunities to benefit from their position and go after all of them, then we can do it. But I don't want to go after just oil and gas more than we go after, say, somebody who can use Burisma or Trump, who can benefit from his hotels from. I mean, there's all sorts of
Right.
stuff. There's all sorts of stuff
Right.
that people, and they are doing it. That's why the people become politicians. That's the whole name of the game is that.
Well, right. That's the kind of thing. It's like, okay, are we raising a fuss because we found something, or are we raising a fuss because we're targeting? And so, listen, I don't know. My stance on politicians on the show is quite clear, so I'm not here to defend anyone. I we'll see. We'll see what happens. But um, you know, and just what you touched on again is that this kind of thinking, it applies to all politicians. And so, is there anything here? We'll find out. And listen, if it is, we'll well on them more than anybody else. So, and the
Yeah.
commissioners are welcome to come on and explain their side. We've had on one or two in the past. So if they want to come on and explain their side, then we're happy to get them on the podcast and ask them all the tough questions.
So, Ryan, we have some articles that came out about the Texas freeze. Oddly enough, the last time our guest was on, that's precisely what we talked about. Was that so?
Mhm.
That it's interesting that we're going to be revisiting that again now. With him, probably something we're going to be going over. But anyway, the freeze. There's but the articles that are coming out from CNBC is 9 months after Texas freeze, the power grid remains vulnerable, and energy experts say new regulations allow too much wiggle room for companies to avoid weatherization improvements. One of the questions that we had, Ron, was what are the costs? How are these costs going to pass along to the consumer if they do this weatherization? And that may have factored into it. So I do understand that this is something that needs to be addressed because it's a serious issue if we do have another freeze like that. That's not something that we want to happen again. But at the same time, it's got to be cost effective too.
Well, and this is, we talked about, I can't remember, like you said, it's been so long, but, should you buy a generator or not, and trying to go through all those things, and, what's the likelihood of it happening again? And so it's funny, I had someone on Twitter tag me on a post. I'm trying to see if I can find it. This last week, and this guy, I don't know who this person is. The person that not the person tagged me, the person that's speaking here. But essentially, they're claiming that due to some polar vortex wind out of the west or something, that December 13th is the day, I believe, that the Panhandle is going to see like minus 12-degree weather or something like that. Now, I'm not a meteorologist. I'm barely a podcaster, so I have no idea if any of that's true or not. But I was sitting there thinking, oh man, not again. Surely not. I thought this was like once in a decade type of event we had here. And so, um, hopefully we don't have to go through that again. Because okay, obviously with the power failing, but aside from the power, yeah, here it is. This is according to Heinrich Leopold, whoever that is. I don't know. By December 13th, zonal west winds are much cooler at 4 degrees Celsius, now at 12 degrees Celsius, unable to warm up in the invading polar air, which is flooding the Midwest, Dakotas at minus 36 degrees Celsius. As cold as the Arctic, as cold as the Arctic. Colorado at minus 32 degrees Celsius, cold going deep into the panhandle at minus 24 degrees Celsius, which is about minus 11 Fahrenheit on December 13th. So I don't know if that's true or not. I have no idea. I'm not big on long-term weather forecast. But there you go. That's my public service announcement for people who are curious. Someone did tag me in that. I have literally no idea who the author of that post is. I can't speak to it. But to your point, is, did they do so if we have that, we're going to find out real quick in a hurry whether the grid can sustain it. Now, that doesn't mean the whole state will be blanketed. Obviously, it could be different. But, if we see these cold temperatures again, we're going to find out, were the changes made? And if they're not, listen, if the changes haven't been made and we haven't got the grid up to date, all these things for the past article, they're going to go away because all those people are going to have to resign anyways. Like the outcry will be so outrageous, and they'll get primaried. So they better hope that they've made enough steps, because if not, it won't matter. People are going to run against them, primary them, and they're going to get voted out.
Yeah, so I'm that's going to be curious to see, man, because we don't need that. I know. I remember just one example is while we were here, our next door neighbor, and I may have mentioned this on the show. Ambulance had to come, I mean, they were in bad shape. They were, on oxygen and didn't have any power, no gas, no heat. It was not the best situation around here. So it puts a lot of lives at risk when we lose power like that. We become so dependent on it. There needs to be someone that can at least evaluate the situation and see what needs to happen. I mean,
that's the frustrating thing, is that we're so politicized now. You don't know who to trust, right?
Mm-mm.
Have we made the upgrades? Have we not? Republicans will say we have, maybe, and Democrats won't, or whoever on what side, and you don't know who to trust. Another thing is that the Texas grid is obviously a big grid, big place. So there's probably vulnerabilities that are hard to find, just because it's a lot of work, a lot of effort, takes a lot of time. So you kind of have the natural baked in potential for bad things to happen, just because you're talking about such a huge area. But aside from that, it's hard to know who to trust right now. And so we might find out. And unrelated news, I did order some firewood. So just
firewood. We need to get
just-
one of them heaters that can heat like a room, because last time we were all bunkered up in sleeping bags in the master bedroom. All of me, my wife, kids, we were all huddled up. No heat.
Oh yeah.
So we would do that for as long as we could stand it, and then we'd run out to the car, turn the heater on, and go get some gas and slip and slide all around.
Oh, it was crazy, man. And that was this year. That wasn't like last year or 2 years ago. That was this year that happened. So I think I see David back there in the green room. David, give us a thumbs up if you can hear us. I'll bring you on. There he is. Okay, well, the man, the myth, the legend himself, David Blackman. How's it going, sir?
Hey, fine. I'm sorry to be doing this on my cell phone.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Not at home today.
Oh, what's that?
I'm not at home today.
Oh, okay. Well, good for you. Hopefully you having good travels. David, so we had to apologize. We said we're going to get you on more regularly, and we didn't do that this year. But next year, our commitment to you is to get you on more regularly, because we love your insight.
There we go.
So, we were just talking the last time we had you on. We were talking about the freeze. Of course, a lot of stories broke this past few days about whether the grid's improved, whether the Railroad Commission was in cahoots, all kinds of stuff. We need a perspective. So give us your perspective on what's happened with the freeze since the last time we spoke.
Well, they've done some good things. They've got most, if not all, of the critical natural gas production and transportation infrastructure now designated properly as critical infrastructure, which virtually none of it was in February, because, frankly, the operators and the companies that operate a lot of the pipelines had not, filed their annual one-page form that they're required to file to be designated that way. And so during the freeze, a lot of those facilities had electricity cut off to them, and that's why they froze up. Had as long as the gas is flowing through compressors and through wellhead equipment and through the pipelines, that equipment is not going to freeze. It will remain flowing. But when you turn the electricity off, the compressors go off, because most of them have been converted from burning natural gas to using electricity instead, because of global warming activists and to reduce emissions. And so that's a consequence. It's one of the unexpected consequences of all this hysteria about global warming. So that's happened. The PUC has recommended to all the power companies that operate the power stations that they winterize their equipment. Whether that's been done, nobody seems to know. No one can tell me. No one at the governor's office will return my phone calls because they don't like some of the stuff I've written about the grid, I guess. And then so hopefully some of that's happening. Unfortunately, I was told yesterday the PUC in its new regulations is not going to require any of these power plants to be winterized to 2021 standards. They're going to require them to winterize to the standard of 2011, when we had that previous storm, which was not quite as severe. And so there are going to be some requirements in these new regulations to winterize, but it won't be up to the requirement that would have gotten us through last February. And then the final thing that, is the big elephant in the living room that I've written about many times, and it's why the governor's office doesn't like me, I think, is that we have a very severe shortage of thermal dispatchable reserve capacity on our grid. And that means we don't have natural gas power plants, a fleet of plants, anywhere in the state ready to come online during a weather emergency like we had last February. And so that, and no one is doing anything. The legislature, the governor's office, PUC, or ERCOT, nobody is doing anything to incentivize or require new capacity be built. So that's where we are. We have a shortage of capacity, and we all should pray we don't have another big winter storm.
Well, I was just telling the listeners that someone tagged me in a post on Twitter. I'm not a weatherman, don't pretend to be one. And some person is arguing that by December 13th, we're going to have a really cold winter storm move through. Have you heard that? Any forecast outlook for what the winter should be? Because obviously I have no idea. I don't, I barely keep up.
You
with
live in North Texas. Yeah,
what's that?
We both live in North Texas. Yeah. We know that the weather guys up here can't tell us what the weather's going to be this afternoon, much less on December 13th. So I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe there might be some long range forecast out there that says that, but I haven't heard that.
We expect you to know everything, David, when you come on.
Yeah, I don't. I don't know anything like that.
No, that's okay. Yeah, we definitely don't either. But someone tagged me in it, and this guy was like, I don't know, some kind of vortex and cold and all this stuff. I'm like, I don't know what we're talking about here, but whatever. Okay, let's talk a little oil and gas here. I know you wrote something last week talking about the SPR release. As we're looking at this morning, WTI is traded at 71.11. Maybe back us up with your thoughts on the SPR release and what we should look for, at least on the U.S. side, companies to respond as they are, looking forward to 2022. Uh-oh.
I think we lost him.
I think we lost him there. That might be it. The one weather question, that was enough for him. Yeah, I think he's froze. Let me just put him back in the green room there for a second. Well, yeah, he's okay. He's gonna come back in, I think. Anyways, so I don't know, Josh. What do you think? He sounds like there's some improvements been made on the grid, but plenty of things that need to be done.
Yeah, so just looking at it, I know we talked a little bit about coal at one point. The question I have is, with all these things that are happening, if they are not taking the necessary precautions to at least have some backup plans for this, that's just not a good look. That's just not a good look at all. I mean, it's putting a lot of people's lives at risk. I mean, even if they're saying, look, this is what we need to do, and it's going to take us 3 years to do it, but we're working on it. That's actually reasonable, but just ignoring it or pretending like it doesn't exist, that's just not going to cut it.
Well, be back, David?
Well, I don't know. I'm sorry.
That's all right. No. We thought the weather question got you mad at us, so.
No, I just don't have a good enough signal here, apparently.
Well, I tell you, it's let's see here. We can hear you fine. We'll turn. Okay. Let's see. I don't think. Maybe you want to turn your video off on your end. I don't know if you can do that or not. On the phone.
I think I can.
There we go. Maybe that'll help the signal some. Okay. What we're going to next, David, was the SPR release. We talked about. I know you wrote something last week. About that, you've been covering it. What are your thoughts on the SPR release and how it might impact the U.S. side going into 2022?
Well, it really, I don't think will have any real impact at all. I noticed that, of course, we had a big collapse in oil prices Friday because of this new strain of COVID that everyone seems to be panicking about, except for the people in South Africa who discovered it. But apparently it's the price has recovered somewhat today, and I would expect that to be a pretty temporary phenomenon. The release itself was, they were already going to release 20 million barrels because of something Congress did early in the year as a pay for. You know, they're selling oil to pay for one of their spending programs, and so it's really only 30 million barrels, with another 10 million supposedly coming from India and Japan, which is altogether 40 million barrels of oil, which is 4/10 of one day's consumption globally, and 2 days of U.S. consumption. So it's nothing. It's a rounding error in the global market, and so it's not going to really that release itself, other than psychologically, won't have any real impact on supply and demand. And it's frankly a pretty poor way to use the SPR, which is of course there for national emergencies. And I'm sorry, $3.25 for a gallon of gas is expensive, but it's not a national emergency, and it just shouldn't be done.
So I was looking at some articles that came out kind of related to this, but so this is NBC News. And the title of the article is Biden administration seeks to raise the price to drill for oil and gas on public lands. Now, I thought this was like a misprint or something, because I know that gas prices have been higher. And so when I saw this, I thought, well, that surely this must be like an old law or something that was done a little while back that's just now coming out. So it appears that this is a brand new thing that just was released a couple of days ago. So in order to combat higher gas prices, they're going to raise the prices.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's just one more sign that there is no coherent energy policy in this administration, other than trying to destroy the domestic PR release was just a PR stunt. You know, they're trying to convince consumers that they're doing something about high gas prices while not really doing anything. And so this is the kind of nonsense, frankly, that we've gotten from this administration since the day it took office. And you know, that deal you're talking about is increased fees for drilling on federal lands, a higher royalty rate. Which I got to be honest, guys, I don't have a problem with them raising the royalty rate on federal production. You know, it's we've been paying 25% royalties on fee leases, private leases in this country for 20 years now, and the federal government standard royalty rate is either 12.5% or in some cases 16.67%. So, you know, I mean, producers on federal lands have been getting a big break on their royalties for a long time anyway. But it's just what it is. I think in question is it's just a sign that this administration really not serious about lowering gasoline prices. It's trying to hide the fact that its policies are causing the higher gasoline prices and not doing it very, very successfully.
Well, do you think that the SPR will hold the prices down in spite of? I mean, this is going to raise the prices some. I'm not sure how much, because it doesn't specify what the royalty rates are going to go to. But maybe, you know, the SPR will, for a specific amount of time, hold it down while these push it up. So maybe it was strategic to do them at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think psychologically. Well, I mean, I can't even say that, to be honest with you, Josh. The day that Biden made his announcement, the price of oil went up by $3 a barrel. It went up. It didn't go down. That was the initial reaction from the market, was that, well, this is such a tiny volume, it's not going to make any difference. So I just don't think that the SPR thing really has any real impact on the markets. Now, COVID, on the other hand, this new variant, to the extent governments start shutting down their economies again, that could have a real impact on oil prices. And we'll just have to wait and see how that all evolves. Japan, I've noted this morning, I saw a story that said Japan was closing its borders again and trying to keep this variant out of their country. So, if the world shuts down again, then we'll have low prices again. But the SPR release really doesn't have any impact on it, in my view.
Okay, so let's kind of talk about that for a second. Obviously, we don't know what the world's going to do. It's kind of Texas weather. We have no idea at this point.
Right.
All bets are off after last year, so we don't know what's going to happen. But how can the U.S. industry survive next year? Can they keep this kind of, I'm calling it low drilling, for lack of a better term, this low drilling rate going into 2022 through the midterms? Do we have to pick up production? How much pressure is there on the industry? Because it feels like there's a lot of I don't want to say conflicting conflicting messaging, but it's kind of hard to get a read for how these producers are dealing with this, because on some level, look at how they handle their stocks and stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, they're making money, they're paying dividends. This seems great, but as we know, you've got to drill wells to make money. So how much longer can we ride it out like this?
Well, I just think it's kind of a cycle we're stuck in for the time being until we have a major energy crisis, which we may experience over this winter, and people wake up and realize that we can't just shut down the oil and gas industry because a bunch of environmentalist activists demand it. And that's what really the conflict here is. You see these CEOs of these corporations kowtowing to the activists, and as I think your question implies, they've cut back on their drilling budgets. They're very reluctant to start drilling wells again because they don't want to, be canceled by the woke crowd on Twitter. Essentially, I mean, that's basically what this boils down to. But the private companies, the privately owned companies are ramping up their drilling out in the Permian Basin and other parts of the country, the Haynesville Shale. Even the Eagle Ford Shale is seeing an increase in rig count. That's a slight one. And more frac crews being activated by private companies, privately owned companies that don't have to deal with activist investor groups. And so we have this dichotomy in the industry right now. And but I just think the corporations are going to be afraid of their own shadows from now on until we have a major energy crisis, which I believe is inevitably going to happen as soon as this winter, possibly, at least in Europe and Asia. And once that happens and the world wakes up and realizes, trying to keep us below 1 degree, make a 1 degree temperature difference over 100 years, it means we're going to pay $10 a gallon for gasoline instead of $3.25. Golly, we may not really support that policy after all. And that's what I think is going to have to happen for all of it to change. And unfortunately, I think it's inevitable that will happen. And maybe sooner than I had thought it was going to be around 2024, 2025 timeframe. But the way things are looking in Europe and Asia right now, if we do have a cold winter, it could happen this winter.
Yeah, going back to the Global Energy Leaders podcast days, I remember we had some discussions about that, and that if that started in late 2016, that show, and that if things didn't change, what you're going to have is this tragic event where you had something avoidable, more or less, and you didn't prepare for it, and then you come to the spot to where there's people that are dying or in bad health or losing power for days and starving or whatever happens. That is the type of thing that you could see really shift the narrative. It's not what you want to see to shift the narrative, right? You don't want a terrible event to have to reshape policy, because that sometimes has its other events, other consequences. But we've seen with some of the COVID stuff over the past year that's definitely had people re-question a lot of their policies and politics. And so this would be an event like that. And obviously, none of us hope it comes to that. That's not.
And wait,
that's not what we're looking.
Can I add to this too?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, please. Well, you cut out there, dude.
Again.
Right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Okay. You're about to go on a good rant. I wanted to hear it, so go ahead.
Sorry, man. So these power companies are all corporations too, by the way. And they're reluctant to build natural gas power plants because of the woke crowd on Twitter. They don't want to be criticized. They're afraid of their activist investors. And it's one of the reasons why we don't have enough natural gas fired capacity on the Texas grid right now. So everybody's building a bunch of wind turbines that lost 97% of what they were generating at the depths of that freeze last year, and solar panels which flatlined for 2 days in Texas during that freeze. And you can build all the wind and solar you want to build, folks. You can cover West Texas in windmills if you want to. But in the depths of a storm, it's going to be useless because they're going to freeze up. And they're not being built to survive storms like that. And no one's going to require them to, because they know the news media, the Houston Chronicle and the Texas Tribune, will go crazy if you require these wind and solar companies to actually spend the money they ought to be spending to ensure they can generate in an emergency. And so that's why, I mean, this same dynamic is a big problem on the Texas grid, and it's going to take action by Republican politicians in Austin to change that. And they're all afraid of their own shadows too. So this is all about climate change, activism. It's why we have these problems. Texas never had any major blackout issues until we started trying to work wind energy into our grid. You can look it up. I did. And it is what it is. It all relates to climate change policy. And it's going to take, unfortunately, major changes in energy and environmental policy take major catastrophes to happen before we can do it. And that's what's going to happen here sometime in the next 2 or 3 years.
Josh, I don't know about you, but that sounded like David was announcing a candidacy for something. You going for governor, railroad commission, president? David, you want to go ahead and make a formal announcement?
Oh, God.
Where's yours?
Man. No, I'm too old, man. If I was 45, I'd actually probably think about it, but I'm 65. No thanks.
Okay, David. Well, we will, I guess, wrap it up with that. That's a good way to close it out there. Where can people find you? Obviously, Forbes, Shell Mag, anywhere else? He cut out on the plug. Let's see if he can't come back. I'll find his stuff. Forbes and Shell Mag, I believe, are the two main spots David is at. And we'll link to his LinkedIn as well. So, okay, let's see here. Yeah, he dropped out. Okay. All right, Josh, what else we got, brother?
All right, a couple last things. As David Blackman mentioned, I'm sure everybody knows, Omicron variant rattles oil markets. We're not sure how that's going to play out, really. So that'd be something that is going to be in the news this week. BP plans a large-scale green hydrogen project in the UK. That's just something just to keep an eye on, just kind of see how BP does. It may encourage other investments in some greener energy. And with that, Ryan, I think that's it, man.
Okay, and thanks, David, for coming on. We'll be sure to get him on more next year. That's my fault for not reaching out more often. He's always gracious with his time, even when he's traveling. So we appreciate that. Listeners, with that, until next time, keep climbing.